The Dragon's Return, Chapter 29, Lamia, Part 1. Rose had never expected to earn a position this high in Camelot. She had come here looking for work after her father passed. She'd heard there were openings for maids in Camelot, and had found herself employed rather quickly upon her arrival. She'd made fast friends with the steward, George, and had been offered the position as the personal maidservant to Lady Merlin shortly after Merlin became a lady. She quite liked Merlin. She was nice. She had been a maid before she became a lady, and she shared her food and gossiped with Rose whenever she had time. Upon learning that Merlin was to be the next queen of Camelot, Rose had been set to learn a whole new set of skills, including how to read, so she could assist Merlin when she became queen. Lady Gwen had been wonderful, helping her learn how to read in exchange for spending a few hours watching her son Thomas. It had never occurred to Rose that Merlin was still technically the physician's assistant, not until news of a mysterious illness arrived from the outlying town of Longstead. 4 cases of the sweating sickness had been reported from the lower town, so Gaius could not attend to the village. So he suggested Merlin be sent instead. Gwen could not go with her. It would be too big of a risk for her to possibly catch whatever was affecting the people of Longstead, and passing it on to her young son. So Rose was going with Merlin instead, along with nearly the whole group of knights that everyone called the Knights of the Round Table. Sirs Gawain, Elian, Percival, and Leon were gallant and noble, and Rose couldn't help but blush around them. She hadn't interacted with them much before now. Sir Gawain was funny. He went out of his way to talk to Rose and make her laugh. Sirs Percival and Elian refused to let her or Merlin, or the woman from Longstead who'd brought the news, Mary, carry anything. Even Sir Leon was helpful to Rose. It had been some time since she had ridden a horse. Her family had one when she was young, maybe 7 or 8, but they'd had to sell her during a harsh winter. She'd explained this to the group in a small voice. "When I was young, we didn't even have a horse," Merlin said casually. "My wife and I never had horses. Lancelot had to teach me how to ride one," Percival said, laughing lightly. "Oh, that's nothing. First time I rode a horse, I was so drunk I ended up riding the thing backwards for near half a league," Gawain said, making Rose laugh behind her hand. Merlin laughed loudly, Mary chuckling as well. Leon rolled his eyes. "Here, ease up on her reins a little. She knows you're nervous. It's making her nervous," he said, showing Rose how to hold the reins properly. The trip to Longstead took 2 days. When they arrived, Rose followed Merlin into the house that had been set aside for the ill. Merlin frowned as she entered. It felt like they were there for hours, Rose fetching water and handing Merlin whatever it was she needed. By the next morning, Merlin's expression had turned grim. "There is something at work here I don't understand," she admitted, and John, Mary's husband, turned serious. "You're suggesting sorcery," he said, and Merlin glanced around before nodding. "I was afraid of that. The night I found Alfard, I sensed something. We need to get back to Camelot as quickly as possible." They set out within the hour, riding as fast as they dared. The real trouble only started after they found and the knights took out the band of brigands. They'd had a girl captive. She was pretty and oddly uninjured. Not that she would let Merlin touch her, to double-check that. She barely let Rose near her, clinging to the knights like moss on a tree. The knights grew snappish, all air of playful banter vanishing. All help, too. They left all the work of setting camp to Merlin and Rose. All their attention lavished on the girl, Lamia. Things came to a head when Rose stumbled and spilled an armful of firewood she'd been carrying. One of the pieces landed a hair's breadth from Lamia. "Clumsy oaf," Leon bit out, and his arm swung out to strike her. She never saw how Merlin got between them as fast as she had. She could have sworn her ladyship had been on the other side of the camp. All Rose knew for certain was that Merlin did get between them, and caught Leon's slap across the face. The sound of his gloved hand meeting her face seemed to echo through the clearing. Leon stepped back, and Rose thought she saw a momentary flash of confusion in his eyes. Then he met Lamia's gaze again and sneered at Merlin, who wiped her bloody nose on her sleeve in silence. She pulled Rose away from the knights. That night, Rose was awakened by a hand over her mouth. She almost screamed until she recognized Merlin's pale face in the light of the moon. Merlin pressed a finger to her lips and Rose nodded. She remained silent as she followed Merlin out of the small circle of sleeping knights. Lamia, asleep, curled up next to Percival, or at least she looked asleep. Merlin carefully guided her horse with them. Just hers, though. Rose frowned. The moment they were out of earshot of the camp, she spoke lowly. You need to ride for Camelot. But my lady— No, I will not leave them to die at that thing's hands, Merlin said, and Rose shivered. Then you agree? It's Lamia doing this, changing them, she said, and Merlin nodded, helping Rose up onto her horse. And I fear it gets worse from here. But I will not abandon them. Lysair knows the way home, Merlin said, circling to the front of her horse. Rose frowned. For just a moment she thought she saw a flash of light, like a firefly in the dark. Merlin circled back to her and paused. After a second's thought, she pulled off a necklace on a leather cord. On it rested 2 rings. She handed it to Rose, who slipped it on, confused and more than a little scared. Take this. If any guard tries to stop you or argues that Arthur is busy, tell them to show him the signet ring, she said, and stepped back from the horse, smacking her on the flank and sending her bolting through the trees with Rose clinging to her back. Chapter 30. Lamia, Part 2. Agravaine could not figure out what Arthur saw in the serving girl, Merlin. She was pretty, sure, but she was a peasant, a bastard, from what he'd been able to weed out. He'd been trying to spread rumors about that for a while, but then her father, whom no one seemed to know, had gone and sacrificed himself to stop Arthur from closing the tear Morgana opened between the worlds. The minor rumors he'd managed to start had died off after that, giving way to rumors that Merlin's father had been a wandering warrior, spending his life saving those who could not save themselves. Her mother had been to Camelot a few times before her death years ago. Apparently, she'd been exceedingly kind and helpful around the castle while she was there. The people loved her too. It was obnoxious, honestly. Wherever he went in the lower town, whenever he asked about her, he heard stories of her helping Gaius treat the people, delivering multiple children over the span of the 6 years she'd been in Camelot. He could not escape the stories about this girl. He would be well rid of the up-jump peasant when Morgana was queen, as she should be. Honestly, he hoped the girl never returned from Longstead. Perhaps the old physician's plan to send the girl to investigate this mystery illness would backfire. She could fall ill and die from it. That would please Morgana greatly. It seemed that some god or other had been listening to Agravaine's wishes when the group that had left for Longstead remained gone. 5 days passed, and Arthur began to go quiet. He did that a lot when Merlin went missing. They should be back by now. Or bare minimum have sent word, Arthur said. Gaius nodded. Agravaine made himself nod. Perhaps there's been some delay in Longstead, or the bridge at Breckford River may be down, he suggested. He didn't want to spend any more time even talking about that obnoxious servant. No, I spoke to a patrol that went through there just yesterday, Arthur said. Gaius, is your work here done? I am satisfied that the sweating sickness has all but passed. We leave for Longstead at first light, Arthur ordered. His tone brooked no argument. Agravaine was annoyed at having to hop on his horse and go out after a serving wench that Arthur had decided to bed. This was a waste of time. He could be working on the plan to bribe the mapmaker's apprentice to get his hands on the map of the siege tunnels. He did enjoy that he got a watch shift. Leaving the others by the fireside and hoping at least one of them would be dead when he got back was always at least a little fun, even if it never happened. Tonight, though, he was a ways away from the camp when he heard the sound of hoofbeats. Turning, he blinked as a familiar horse raced into the clearing. The rider managed to pull to a stop, and in the half-light of the moon, he spotted Lysair, Merlin's horse. Was not being ridden by the would-be queen, but instead by her maid. The girl had seen better days. She had twigs in her hair, scratches on her face, and the horse was nearly foaming as Agravaine managed to catch hold of it. Lord Agravaine, thank God! She stumbled off her horse. "You have to help! Please! The knights King Arthur sent with Lady Merlin to Longstead have gone mad! There's a creature!" She got no further. Agravaine moved quickly, the dim light of the night a blessing. She didn't see the hilt of his dagger coming for the side of her head. He caught her as she crumpled and dragged her behind a bush. He had to get the horse out of the way now as well. He dropped Rose, yes, that was her name, behind a thick growth and stepped to the horse, smacking it hard on the flank with the flat of his blade. It reared and took off running. Once it was out of earshot, he turned back towards the bush where he'd put the girl. "Lord Agravaine," Sir Lancelot called out. Agravaine stowed his knife quickly. "Yes, Sir Lancelot," he asked, smiling. "Arthur woke and you were gone. Are you all right?" Lancelot asked. "Of course. I simply wanted to gather some more wood for the fire," Agravaine said, and Lancelot nodded. "Arthur doesn't want anyone wandering too far alone. He's very protective," Agravaine said, trying to sound fond instead of annoyed. "With everything that's happened to him, I believe he has every right to be protective over the people he cares for," Lancelot pointed out. Agravaine smiled slightly. He followed Lancelot back to camp, glancing over his shoulder at the bushes where he'd left Merlin's maid. He could not risk leaving camp again, but once the others had settled back down, Agravaine pulled a small mirror out of his saddlebag. Breathing on it, he scrawled out a message left in the condensation left behind. Left a present for Helios, half a league from Breckford Bridge. The warlord they'd been dealing with was weak for pretty girls. It was a weakness Agravaine knew Morgana had manipulated, but it would be easier for her if there was another target for his amorous attentions. And it was possible that the girl might have information on the would-be queen that no one else was privy to. He stowed the mirror and sat back by the fire, thinking about what the girl had said. A creature causing the knights to go mad. Perhaps two of his problems would take each other out. If the knights laid hands on Merlin, Arthur would never trust them again. Perhaps Agravaine could delay them long enough for the enchanted knights to take out the serving wench completely. He smiled a little at the thought. Perhaps, by this time next week, he would have news that would make Morgana smile.